About how to get our farm closer to what natural processes look like. Um, in nature, everything balances itself out. Like you've got raptors that take care of rodents, that take care of insects, that take care of bacteria and process nutrients in the soil and give back. Hello, today we're at Party Farm and we're going to transplant some Napa cabbage. So I thought I'd talk to you about how I transplant. There are probably billions of different ways how people transplant, but this is how I do it. I have a long measuring tape. This one's 100 feet, but you can get them however long you need them, along the length of my bed. And I already prepped this bed last week. I broad forked it, laid compost, amendments, put drip tape down, and then I put weed barrier down so that I won't have to weed it throughout the fall and winter. But if I hadn't done that and I just had bare soil, I would still use the tape. So it's useful whether you're using weed barrier or not. Like I said, there's many ways to do this. Some people I've seen use ropes that they tie knots in for their spacing, like an 18-inch spacing. You tie a knot every 18 inches. Or some people use a tool that they're to measure just like the distance from one to another. But the short answer is, like, depending on the plant you grow, you need, or I guess like the reason is depending on the plant you're growing, it needs a certain amount of space, a certain amount of access to nutrients and water in order to survive, in order to thrive and produce delicious, abundant food. So with Napa cabbage, I want to get a nice big head, so I'm going to transplant it at a 12-inch spacing with the cabbage behind me. This is kale, but that's cabbage. I transplanted at an 18-inch spacing because I wanted to give it more room to head up, and because the growth pattern, like the leaves spread out a lot more and I don't want them shading one another out. But this Napa cabbage here is a 12-inch spacing. So before you got here, I was cutting holes in the weed barrier and I cut a hole in the drip tape, which is also why I'm all wet. But the holes are pre-made. So when I transplant, I'm often with a large group. So you don't have to do this if you're by yourself. But since I'm kind of showing you my style, I will show you how I do it. And if I know that there's going to be, I have 3-foot wide beds. I'm planting cabbage at a 12-inch spacing. So that means that I can put 3 cabbages at every foot. This is math that I do in the winter so that I don't have to do it while I'm transplanting in the summer. But in order to save myself a little bit of time and body work, I like to, if I was at my big farm, I would pop these out with a tray popper, but I have a pencil here. So I'll pop out each plug and grab 3 at a time and drop them every foot. And like I said, I do most of the planning in the winter, so I already planned that I want X amount of cabbages in the winter. Maybe that's for a 10-person CSA, or because I want to grow enough to share with my friends, or maybe I just really like cabbage. But I'm growing, I think, like 10 feet at a 3-foot spacing. That is, or at a 1-foot spacing and 3-foot beds. That is 30 cabbages. So that's about what I got here. And I'll drop them, and I would keep going, but this is getting long. So the next step is to transplant them. If, like I said, if I wasn't using weed barrier and didn't already have holes, then I would use the tape in the center here to, oh, I had gloves. I got my gloves. If I didn't have weed barrier, I would use the tapes to communicate to myself or to a large group where I wanted to transplant. Since the tape is laid out flat, like, and it's the constant. And if I want a 12-inch spacing, I like to offset my rows at anything larger than a 12-inch spacing. If I'm doing 6-inch spacing, it just doesn't really feel worth it. I'd rather think less and transplant faster. But the 12-inch spacing, if I do 3 rows, I can keep like a triangle. So even though maybe I'm not all the way at the edge of my bed, the hypotenuse of the triangle gives me a longer distance, so it's still about 12 inches away. So if I was using, like, the tape was helpful when I was dropping because I dropped 3 plants every foot. And now as I'm transplanting, if I'm working across from someone, I'll let them know that we're going to transplant the outside rows of the bed at the 12-inch or the 1 inch, or sorry, the 0 or the 12, depending on how you look at it. So I'm starting my bed right off there. And then the inside row would be at the 6-inch. And like I said before, I like the tape specifically because when it's there, if I have someone joining me, and there's already someone across from me, then they can go down like 15, 20 feet. And by the time I get there, like, we're still at a constant pace or at a constant spacing. And this is particularly important if you are trying to get as much food into a small space as you can, because if I'm planning in the winter for 130 CSA members, and that means that I need 80 feet of rutabaga, and I like every 5 feet we miss one, that is, gosh, math is so hard, but like at least 10% of the crop, and so then I might be short on rutabaga. If I also then have a root maggot problem, I'm extra short. So I like the tapes for consistency, and also, like I kind of hinted at, because you have to do less thinking in the field. I'd rather do my thinking in the winter when it's cool and I can drink tea and stay inside and be cozy. And then when I'm in the heat of the day and it's like, just we want to get through the work, then I don't have to think as much because I did all that planning before. I just read the chart and do what it says. And I guess that's kind of what I like about weed barrier too.